Hello and welcome to the MCU Need to Know. I'm Trey.
And I'm Jude.
And this is going to be a podcast dedicated to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I think the best way that we can do this is probably give a little bit of a kind of our introduction. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and go first?
Okay. Let's see. I'm Jude, Trey's cousin, and he wanted to do this podcast, and I thought, why not? It'd be a lot of fun. I listen to a lot of podcasts. We both love the MCU and Marvel.
Which might be an understatement.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. The number of texts and conversations we've had building up to Infinity War. And I'd say even other movies that don't have that kind of build-up.
I was going to say, I remember for Ant-Man, I think I think I knew before, but where it started to like really solidify how into the MCU you were giving me like countdown to Ant-Man and the Wasp, but they were all Paul Rudd related gifts, which was like amazing.
Yes, it was Paul Rudd related gifts. Just counting down the days because hey, I loved Ant-Man.
Me too.
And I enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like those were two fun movies. And oddly, some of my friends don't have those very high on their list, or as high as I think they should have. I
already started this podcast by lying. I need to clarify. At first, I didn't like Ant-Man, but I re-liked it when I went back and watched it. I don't know. I was in a weird headspace the first time I watched it, and then I have since grown to like it.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that one the first time through. And at that time, I was watching a lot of videos and stuff. And so in those videos, I was trying to find out what it was about. So I knew going in to expect it like a heist movie.
Mm-hmm. Which, actually, I think this kind of leads us pretty easily into our connection to Marvel. I'll speak for me. I honestly I'm not a big comic fan. Even now, I don't read comics that well. I appreciate the artwork, but the format doesn't work for me. My connection to Marvel has stemmed specifically from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How about you? When did Marvel kind of become the center of your fandom?
I'll be honest, I think the movies brought me back to Marvel. In middle school, I would cut the grass, and that money went to the comic shop. I actually got X-Men, and more DC, believe it or not. Superman, Batman, and the X-Men were my thing. I always loved Spider-Man, but it was the Spider-Man cartoon at the time, back in the 80s. I think Spider-Man and Super Friends or something like that. It's on Disney Plus now, I believe. That kind of brought me back to there. And then I started going back to the local comic shop, picked up the it was 2014 when Spider-Gwen first came out. In Silk, right after their Spider-Verse storyline. And I started picking up those comics, started picking up Amazing Spider-Man, and it was around that time. Peter Parker's just coming back after the Superior Spider-Man run, I believe. Somebody's going to listen to this and correct my timeline, I'm sure.
What else are podcasts for?
I tell you what, I'm hoping someone's going to listen to this and correct my timeline.
That's how you know we'll made it, is when people are sending in tweets and correcting us.
Yes. But essentially right around there is where I started getting right back into comics. And then started drawing again and found artist Todd Knock. And started following other artists. Particularly, again, for some reason I was just drawn to Marvel and Spider-Man and Iron Man and the X-Men. And I'm trying to get you to read more comics.
I know it is a sin. It is crazy. As much as I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the fact that I can't, and I've tried multiple times. I even own, I think, the first 4 issues of the Vision run that came out, I think, a couple years ago. And there's only 5 issues, and for whatever reason, I just never went back and finished it. I bounce off the comic format for whatever reason.
Yeah, see, I need to go get those, especially with the show coming out. What I've been getting and trying to stay up with was the Miss Marvel run for some reason.
So I did read that.
Yeah, it's really good. It spoke to me, and I think because of my daughters, my oldest would read that sometimes as well. So that's just kind of where I'm at right now.
on the topic of Marvel sins, it goes back even further for me. Like when it comes to superheroes, like I knew Batman, I knew Spider-Man, because I think in the 90s there was a Spider-Man animated show on Nickelodeon that I would watch, but it wasn't too deep. And I watched the Raimi Spider-Man movies and I liked those well enough. But speaking of being called out on our timeline, if I'm remembering correctly, I remember being really burnt out from Spider-Man 3, like, because that one I think generally is regarded as kind of a disappointment. And I was in that camp. And I think shortly after, the Iron Man trailer dropped. And I remember specifically watching that trailer and thinking, nah, I don't want to see that. I'm not into that. And it's so funny to me that my first connection to the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like just a general not interested whatsoever, to now where it is. For those who don't know, because I forgot to introduce myself, I used to stream on Twitch. Like my entire almost theme for my emotes were all Marvel based. Like I am full on fanboy mode now.
I think your timing's right, because I remember seeing Spider-Man 3. Basically, my brother and friend were up, and they were up for the weekend. It was my bachelor party-esque kind of thing, and just we went and saw Spider-Man 3. And I remember enjoying it, but also being extremely disappointed at the same time and trying to hide that disappointment.
It was that trying to convince yourself that you liked it. Because I remember I went with my dad, and I think we took like 2 or 3 of my friends. Like this was like we were like all going to hang out, and so he took us to the movies. And I remember like walking down, because our local theater. I walking down out the front steps of the theater, just thinking, yeah, that was cool. Like I was trying to like justify it to everybody else who just did not like it, and it was like, man, this maybe I don't like superheroes.
Yeah, no, and I've actually went back because I think it's on Netflix now, as of today, and I enjoyed it.
Really?
Yeah, it was fun. It was Spider-Man. It wasn't like great. It wasn't the best. It was it was, you're on Netflix. You're bored, and I watched it again. Just thought I'm gonna give it a shot, and I did enjoy it. I don't know. It was. I think I might have been too harsh on it, or I'm either getting old and not being as critical as I used to be.
Well, no, because I definitely went through a phase where I was like hypercritical of movies, because I thought that's the way you're supposed to be a movie critic. It's a lot easier for me to kind of pull out the things I do enjoy. But I haven't gone back and rewatched it since. Which is crazy because, like, and this is tangent on tangent, I remember one of the first Blu-rays I bought was Spider-Man 3, just because I remember specifically thinking, like, oh, I want to see how good this looks on the Blu-ray format. But other than, like, skipping to, like, a scene or here or there, I haven't seen it since I think that walk of shame out of the theater.
Right. No, I didn't. That is one I did not purchase. I watched it because it was on Netflix.
Okay. No, so you're not vouching for it that much.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea where I stand, like, as much as I love Spider-Man, I still have not seen Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Really?
Yeah, after that first one, I just wasn't interested. To me, I thought Toby was better than Andrew Garfield, and so it wasn't for me. And I thought, okay, I'll see it on rent or whatnot, and that never happened. Then Tom Holland happened, and why go back?
Exactly. I will say this regarding, I'll go out on this limb with you, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I would have walked out of that movie had I not gone with friends. Like I was so like, this is just bad. I would have walked out, but I had gone out with a group of friends to see it. And it's like, well, I'm not going to be the fuddy-duddy that ruins the mood. But man, it was just like, it was bad.
I've seen clips, and I feel comfortable saying I have not seen that one. I was talking about disappointment. In trying to prepare for the first Avengers, I had not seen Incredible Hulk, and I ran to Blockbuster to give you an idea. Like, Blockbusters were still open, and I picked up that. I picked up Captain America: First Avengers. Like, I gotta watch these to get ready for Avengers, and I accidentally grabbed Hulk, the Ang Lee one.
Oh no!
Oh, I didn't finish it, but expecting one thing and getting that was unbelievably disappointing.
And which the Incredible Hulk is already on kind of a lot of people's lower totem poles. So I can only imagine. Have you seen the Incredible Hulk since?
Yeah, I saw it. I actually liked it.
Yeah, I like it too.
I mean, I agree. It's down on the lower end of those movies, but I actually enjoyed it.
I from what I've understood, they were like they were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks with both Iron Man and Incredible Hulk, because I think they only came out within 2 months of each other. And it was Marvel's attempt at trying to figure out like which direction they wanted to go, and obviously Iron Man took off with the success it did. So tonally, Incredible Hulk is a lot different than any of the other ones, but they're still good to be had. With Black Widow on the horizon, I love that they've kept Ross. Like, that connection is still there between those movies.
Oh yeah, like I do feel like it is a darker movie tonally, but I'd say the same thing of the first 2 Iron Mans. That when you look at where the MCU is totally now versus that even first, I mean, Captain America First Avenger, he's busting through the door with a handgun and shooting and killing people in such a way that you wouldn't see now, you know.
Yeah, now he just kicks them and breaks their spines as they land against the side of a ship.
You know what? Knockout kick. That's all. That's fine. It's better than killing, right?
If it works for Batman, why can't it work for the MCU?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, as long as we're now here in the MCU proper, what is your favorite MCU movie, and who's your favorite MCU hero? Because I don't think they have to be the same.
My favorite MCU movie still might be Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Really?
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm coming from it from which one do I go to and watch over and over regularly, right? Or it's just like if I'm looking for something to watch, I'll kind of default back to that one for some reason. To me, they just captured Spider-Man so well that that's the one I keep going back to. One, because you mentioned how, like, once you go Tom Holland, how could you go back to any of the other Spider-Mans? Like, Tom Holland is Spider-Man. He embodies the role really well. And the thing that I think I personally like about Homecoming is that it is clearly cemented in the MCU, but not in a way that it feels beholden to it. Like, it still feels like it's its own thing, while still being nestled in the MCU itself. Yeah, I agree. Like, the way they did the Stark cameos or referred to the other movies, it just felt natural, in such a way that it wasn't what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you could watch that on its own, and be fine.
It's standalone.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know why I couldn't find that.
Would you say that Spider-Man is your favorite MCU hero, or would that differ for you?
God,
if you want to think on it, I can.
You know what? You go. Let me think.
Okay, yeah, think on it. So as for me, anybody who knows me knows that my favorite superhero in the MCU is easily Captain America. Mantis. It's definitely Mantis. And what's funny, again, the theme of this episode is going to be Trey's Marvel sins. I remember before the MCU, like, I had heard of Captain America, and I was like, oh, that's the cheesiest character ever. That's so dumb. Like, because Spider-Man, any kid growing in the 90s, like, Spider-Man was my go-to superhero. But it wasn't until, really honestly, it wasn't even until Winter Soldier that I, like, completely fell in love with Captain America as a superhero. I don't know. From Winter Soldier 4, that's when I started realizing how much I enjoyed him as a character. And Winter Soldier is easily my favorite MCU movie. You and I have had discussions about this before, because I think we have traded, like, what our top 5 Marvel movies are. And for forever, Winter Soldier was at the top of the list. Then Endgame came out, and I still go back and forth. But if we go by the metric of which ones we can easily go back to and watch over and over again, the amount of times that I have watched Winter Soldier is bonkers.
I think that's the one. You know, be honest, Winter Soldiers, I had not yet reached to where I was seeing all of them in the theater yet.
Really?
In fact, I saw that at home on DVD rental, I think Redbox, and I had a junior. I teach, by the way, but I had a junior who would come to school and ask me if I'd seen Winter Soldier yet, and get angry with me, and not like a fake play angry, like legitimately.
What are you doing?
Anger problems, and I'm like, okay, wow. In some ways, I'd say deservedly so. It was such a good movie.
It's incredible. Speaking of standalone, I feel like Winter Soldier can be on its own enjoyed as a movie without having to have the ties to the other superhero movies. Like, it's almost weird how, like, dealing with all, like, the Big Brother and information surveillance, like, it was very prophetic in a way, kind of what became, like, the topic of conversation for people who have security issues and privacy concerns.
Well, it came out right around all the Ed Snowden stuff. So, I mean, it was really timely.
Yeah. And it still holds up, I think, in that regard. So you mentioned something that I kind of now want to know. So you hadn't seen the Marvel movies in the theater up to that one, or just not seeing all of them?
I had not seen all of them.
Okay.
So it was, I think it might have been Age of Ultron where it's a must-see in the theater every time. Because I know, like, Thor, Dark World, that was a red box. Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't see that in the theater.
Was it just, life happens, couldn't get to the theater, or did you not have interest in seeing it in the theater?
A mix of both. There was an element of, okay, life happens, I couldn't get to the theater. But, I mean, let's be honest, if I had the level of interest that I had starting with about Age of Ultron on, I'd have made time. Mm-hmm. Because I've made time on all the others. So so it was a mix of that, of like, yes, it's a Marvel movie, it's MCU. But I don't even know if MCU, I'd have to double check, but I don't know if MCU was as mainstay. Did we just said MCU and everybody knew what it was around that time yet?
When would you say that became a thing? Like the MCU became a normal term for everybody? I
think, for me, I'd have to say after Age of Ultron. Because going into Age of Ultron, it was just, this is the Avengers sequel.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say around there. Yeah, I had to think about that, but that's where I would probably say where MCU started to become a thing was after that. Because after that's when you really started to get the bigger plans, right? And building up to something bigger than just the Avengers movies.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Because again, we have a Discord that we share in my streaming community. We just had this debate not too long ago. Does Phase 2 end with Ultron or Ant-Man?
I want to say Ant-Man. Not Ant-Man. No, I want to say... God, now that you ask me,
I know. Remember. Basically, my larger point was going to be, to me, going to what you say, where the movies feel a lot more planned out and projected. Phase 3, honestly, I think is where it's just like... it's my favorite phase, I think, of the Marvel, because everything went crazy. But if I had to pinpoint exactly the moment MCU became like a household term, it's got to be Captain America: Civil War. I think the news of Spider-Man joining, to overuse a phrase, broke the internet, and I think that's when people started making this distinction of what is MCU or what isn't MCU.
No, and that makes sense. That really does make sense, because I mean, with Avengers, it's a build up to a team up movie. Age of Ultron, you had to build up to a team up movie. But God, I mean, if I think about it, building up to Age of Ultron, there was callbacks to the sequels between those two, but it wasn't like a concluding. They just kind of got together, if that makes sense, with kind of bits and pieces here they called back to. But between that and getting up to Captain America, there was this more Captain America 3, and especially after that, there was just such intentionality of everything being interconnected. That you'd have to say somewhere in that time frame, MCU is where it became commonplace to refer to MCU.
All right. So have you thought on the MCU hero, or would?
Can I have two?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
This is our first episode. We can set the rules now.
All right, awesome. So, honestly, I'm going to go Spider-Man and Iron Man. And I feel like that's kind of a cop-out in some way. For me, Spider-Man, because I love Spider-Man, and Tom Holland just nails it for me. So I'll go with, he's one of my favorite characters, but, I mean, he's had, what, 2 solo movies, a small bit part in Captain America: Civil War, some time in Infinity War. When the Sony deal fell through for a brief moment in time, my thought was, God, that was such a waste of use of that character in Endgame, because there was so little screen time in what he did as far as that contract. So my other one goes to Iron Man, because it's just those two. I mean, they all fit the part really well, but those two, Tom Holland, Robert Downey Jr., just make those characters. And then Iron Man being that, even in movies he doesn't show up in, that thread that pulls everything through. Those two have to be my favorite.
That makes complete sense. The other day on the Marvel subreddit, Marvel Studios, I saw a post where somebody, they had all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies on Blu-ray, and what they did is they went and they pulled out every movie where Stark or the Stark family is mentioned, and I don't think you go more than like a movie or two without Tony Stark or his family being mentioned. Like Tony was like such the backbone of the MCU. Like I totally get that.
But well, back in phase 1 when they were doing those one shots, which I miss, the one shot in Incredible Hulk, they got Robert Downey Jr. to come back and play Stark, and it was called The Consultant. So yeah, so even in those, like he still is there.
To me, they're so intertwined. Like I think I'll count that as one answer. I think that goes well. What do you see the MCU going now that we've kind of completed the first big saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Infinity Saga?
Let's see. In some ways, what I'm hoping for in some ways is more of what we saw in Thor Ragnarok in terms of those team-ups. So we can see those characters more. I don't really want them to stray too much from, I hate to say this, but the formula in that, like, I would like to see him introduce new characters and give them their individual movies to develop. Even if you introduce them in the same way Spider-Man was introduced, or like say Black Panther was introduced, where they show up in some other movie but they still get their solo movie. Because for me, it gives me a chance to fall in love with those characters, right? So like, I loved Captain Marvel. And I love Captain Marvel for a number of reasons. I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the character and enjoyed the movie. I got to take my daughters to see it, and my daughters loved it, right? I mean, that's probably their favorite superhero movie now. So that's, since it was an interesting connection, that, and from what I understand, Brie Larson shot the in-game tag, the in-game scenes before they even did that movie. And if she just showed up randomly, and I mean, I think everybody would agree with this, what's the point? Like, you don't know this character, so I'd hope they still follow that format a little bit. I'll be honest, like, I'm excited about the Disney Plus shows. I'm a little nervous about them just because of the change in episode format. I mean, they're still, I trust them to do well, but like, I hope I get four 1 hour, shows rather than like, oh, here's 30 minutes, and really get to explore those characters. I was going to say, what about you? What's your expectations moving forward?
So I think where we differ, like I'm still on the side, like I definitely want to see the format with the movies and the individual movies and launching new characters, crossovers, like with Black Panther and Spider-Man. But for me, where I differ, I think the strength of the MCU moving forward is going to be through Disney Plus. I am a little worried about whether or not that becomes a success, because you're going to have to grapple with the problem of how do you tell this continuous universe story where you're now introducing these television shows that people may or may not watch. So how reliant can you be on them? But if Disney and Marvel is able to pull it off and make the Disney Plus shows feel like they matter, I think that's where we're going to start to see the MCU have more weight. Because one of my biggest problems, like, I think it's easy to kind of like overlook it, but within this first Infinity Saga, I think they did a lot of telling us versus showing us. For example, the friendship between Tony and Steve was supposed to be a little bit more heavy, like a lot more impactful once they have their falling out in Civil War, but we never really see them interact together in good terms until they kind of start splitting, what I think. And if we can see the MCU fill in those gaps with the Disney Plus shows with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, Loki, like I don't know, like I'm excited to see what they do with that, and I hope it turns out really well.
Well, following the comic book format, thinking like reading the Civil War, like you're the graphic novel of the original Civil War storyline. 7 comics, 8 comics? I can't remember the exact number, but you can read those comics. But it was a big event in the comics. Like there's a graphic novel of comics called Peter Parker, to see the impact it had on Peter Parker. There's one on Spider-Man, one for Black Panther, one for the X-Men. All of those were attached to the event, but the main Civil War graphic novel gave you the main story. So I'm imagining like if they do that, you can still see the movies, not see the Disney Plus shows, and if you want to like dive in extra, here's the appendix or whatever, go into this, and so I think it can be done. There's this fear, and we've experienced it recently, to bring up Rise of Skywalker, where well, I mean, when you have to, like in that one, there's stuff that wasn't in the movie that they're like, oh yeah, but if you go see this book or read the novelization, it's there, right? This isn't something we missed, and so like, I trust, I guess, Marvel and Kevin Feige to pull this off, but like there's that fear then of like, well, do I really, or do people really, can they really not see these shows and get it, or is there going to be that feeling of like, no, if it's important enough for the movie, find a way to put it in the movie, so that would be my fear, I guess, maybe for a larger audience. I don't have to worry about that because I'm going to watch the Disney Plus shows,
right,
and talk about it with you on this podcast. But so I'm not worried about that. But probably for a general, like a larger audience, like if you're looking at where's the MCU future going, and trying to make it fresh and sustainable, that would be a concern.
Do you? Because from what I've understood, I think Kevin Feige and the rest of Marvel have said they're kind of trying not to plan too far ahead because they felt like that was a wall they wrote themselves into whenever they were like putting out these release dates for these movies and then having to shuffle them around. So I don't think we're going to know this for a while, but do you have who you would want to be the next big bad in mind? The next Thanos, I guess? I
think the two most logical choices, one is going to be Galactus. And mainly because if you're going to introduce the Fantastic Four, bring in Galactus, bring in Silver Surfer, and then one my good friend from work keeps pushing is Kang the Conqueror, and mainly because of the time travel. Like, since Kang deals with time as a villain, and you've now messed with time and time travel, it seems like a logical choice. So it seems like one of those two, but I hope it's that slow burn getting up to that.
For me, and again, because I mentioned that most of my Marvel knowledge stems from the MCU, but I browse the subreddit, I kind of see the theories and whatnot. My hope, and what I would love would be able to see like a Norman Osborn, kind of like be this continuous threat in the background of the MCU, and like he becomes one of the larger threats that they have to deal with.
Yeah, see, I would love to see Norman Osborn, and then you get into really murky waters because you start talking about the Sinister Six, the Sinister Six, and Sony, and how long is that deal going to go? Yeah, so they're like Norman Osborn would be fun, but when you start talking about like an Infinity War in-game level threat, you got to be talking otherworldly. You got to be talking those two. You got to be talking maybe Apocalypse way, way down the road when you finally get the X-Men in there. I don't know. Doctor Doom seems like a good big bad for a team-up Avengers maybe movie, but if you're talking like an epic build-up, you got to give somebody who's going to give Captain Marvel a run for their money. Otherwise, it's a short movie.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Just put her off world. It's okay. Well, I'll forgive it.
I think that about does it for our first introductory episode. I think one of the things we had in mind for the MCU Need to Know is that we want to cover the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies as they're coming out, as well as the Disney Plus shows. At the time of this recording, when movies are being released are still in flux due to everything that's going on.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, when all cinemas are closed.
Yeah, during this coronavirus outbreak, we don't know when movies will happen or if they'll happen or whether or not Black Widow will be released digitally.
Let me say this on that. I'm torn. I want it digitally so I can see it and we can do our thing. But at the same time, I don't know if I kind of want to just at this point wait and let's just see it in the theater.
It is so unfair for Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow, the character, who has been long overdue their own solo movie. That this
to
this
have the
happens.
Disney Plus treatment. Yeah.
And like, don't get me wrong, we're speaking within the total scope of entertainment right now. Obviously, there's a whole lot more things that are going on that are terrible,
Yes,
but within the scope
there
of
are
the
many
MCU,
things that are important, but
but it sucks for Black Widow that this is happening to them on their movie that should have been out years ago.
yeah, most definitely.
I guess this, we can kind of preview Black Widow a little bit. How do you feel about Phase 4 basically being started off with a prequel?
I'm okay with that. Like, I mean, like you said, she's deserved this movie. It's time. And I'm okay with that, to start jumping around. I mean, because at this point, the only way, I mean, I guess aside from Thor, the only way you're really going to start to see the characters we know and love again is with some of those prequels or things like that. I mean, you're going to get your Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but they're going to be dealing with fallout of Endgame. The Gamora's in it. It's not going to be the Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. So I'm fine with the prequels.
I think honestly it's the logical step. I mean, I know we had Far From Home as the post-Endgame movie, but even that still kind of felt directly tied into everything that happened with the snap and the larger Avengers movies. After going through everything that happened, it almost feels like you need to take a step back and reground the MCU moving forward, and telling a smaller contained story with Black Widow seems to be a way to kind of bring everybody back down a little bit, I guess. That sounds so negative than I mean it, but like as far as like scale wise, bring it back down from Endgame.
Yeah, no. I mean, that was one of the wonderful things about Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? Infinity War just happened. That was kind of a prequel to Infinity War, and it was kind of like, here's your upbeat movie or film to such a downer that in some ways it made Spider-Man. Now, I loved Spider-Man Far From Home. I loved Homecoming, but in Far From Home, as the follow-up to Endgame, you had to deal with that, and you still had that. As much as it was a fun Spider-Man movie, you still had the hangover, that Endgame hangover, of everything is now different and ended, where at least with Ant-Man and the Wasp, you're able to kind of set that aside for a minute, and so I think that is a good way to move forward with such a beloved character.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens with that movie, whether or not they release it traditionally or whether it gets released digitally. Whatever happens with it, we're definitely going to be talking about it here, as well as the Disney Plus shows in the future, and I'm really excited to be able to do that.
I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing this with me. This is going to be a fun venture, and hopefully something that we can both keep up with. Yeah,
absolutely.
So for those listening, if you would like to chime in with your thoughts on this episode, or even answer the question who your favorite MCU hero/movie is, you can tweet us at MCU Need to Know on Twitter. And I believe it's the same name on Instagram as well, which they, feel free to tag us there. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.